This video is going to be a film study look at Derrick Henry signing with the Baltimore Ravens. I'll focus on 2023 film. Before we get to the numbers, I think it's a massive move for the Baltimore offense, for Lamar Jackson, for Todd Monken, because he's a devastating talent at running back, proven talent with the ability to put pressure on the defense and simultaneously take pressure or responsibility almost off of his teammates. I think the money's great, in my opinion. You may have a different opinion. That's no problem. 2 years, $16 million, with incentives up to $20 million. I think $9 million guaranteed. He just turned 30 years old in January. He's got a lot of touches. Cool. Well, he's been doing that since high school, probably even before. And if you look at the rushing attempts per game, he's coming off a season 2023 that I think will look more similar to what we expect to see in Baltimore in terms of touches per game. 2023, 16 and a half carries per game, down from the previous 4 years. Look, 2019 to 2022, Derrick Henry was at 20, 23, 27, and then 21 attempts per game, rushing attempts per game. That won't be the case in Baltimore on a consistent basis. It's a spread offense, and more on that later. But it can be when the Ravens need it to, or when the situation presents itself. Looking back, it's hard not to wonder what our game plan and play calls would have looked like in the AFC Championship game if the Ravens could have completed that trade with the Titans to acquire him at the trade deadline. Also makes me wonder what the Titans' motivation was in not allowing that trade to go through. Football's a team game, but I have to mention this because the stats are there. In 4 career games against the Chiefs, Derrick Henry has 78 carries, so almost 20 per game, 4 games, 448 yards rushing, and 6 touchdowns. He's a ball-dominant player, potentially. And I think we do need that, even though this is a spread offense. From a receiver standpoint, last year there were complaints from all of us, myself included, about how often certain guys got the ball. Players would have 3 catches for 60 yards in the first 2 possessions, and then all of a sudden not get targeted for 4, 5, 6 possessions in a row. It's a spread offense, not just from a horizontal alignment, meaning we're lining up guys wider, more players wider, so the defenses can't, quote, stack the box, even though it's a little bit of a simplistic explanation for what we do. There's multiple guys who can get 12, 13, 14 carries in a game and be productive. If Keaton Mitchell comes back healthy, he's one of them. But Derrick Henry's a guy who, if we need him to carry the football 24 times in a game, he can give you that. Oh, by the way, he's also played in damn near every football game in his career. From his entire career, 15 to 17 games played in the regular season each year, except for one, which was 2021. I will say this, it would not surprise me if the Ravens draft a running back, and I'm looking at 2 different picks here. Our final selection of the 4th round, which is pick 135, and then our 5th round pick, which is 165. If we have addressed wide receiver, offensive line, corner, and edge by particularly pick 165, but depending on who's available at 135, it would not be surprising to me at all if we go running back at 135. Now, how will Derrick Henry look here? The Titans spent a lot of time in 12 and 13 personnel, one back stuff. And that'll be different with the Ravens. Under center offensive schemes is now really opened up for Baltimore, if you ask me. Although Monken doesn't generally do that for large swaths of the game, even though in 2023 we did go under center some, it was generally to run play action or run jet dive. And that concept looks really good to me, the jet dive. Adding a play action boot element with Lamar is just going to be amazing to finally see. Another way to say it is if that series isn't added in there, I will be disappointed. The play action component for Lamar and our tight ends and running backs, but particularly Mark Andrews, who's a guy that made a lot of catches on play action throughout his career, I think is going to be opened up wide. Because Henry not only puts pressure on the defense, but breaks tackles on his own. That's well documented. And his ability to do that will be seen in the film I'll show here in a moment. But the thing that impresses me the most is, first of all, and I think Skeptic Goat mentioned this on Twitter, so I'm stealing this from him, how efficient his steps are and how he seems to be 2 moves ahead of the defense on these inside zone and outside zone schemes that the Titans ran a lot. It's unparalleled, if you ask me. I don't know. I asked a coaching friend of mine Tuesday afternoon, how does he describe it? And he's like, I don't know. He's like, he looks like he's setting up the second cut, which most running backs, the really good ones, are able to set up the first cut. He almost looks like he's setting up the second one. Now, perhaps that's because, like I said, Skeptic mentioned, he's so efficient and balanced with his feet that he can make the second cut look like it was planned because his body is in position to go 2 ways. Hopefully I explained that in a way that makes sense. I do suspect that Derrick Henry will be used in an intentional manner to attack to the boundary. Now, this is a touchdown run against the Ravens, 15 yards, week 6 in England, that I don't think is necessarily designed to go into the boundary. It ends up cutting back there. Derrick Henry can read on the run exceptionally well. Every NFL running back is trained to read on the run, to be able to make cuts and stay balanced and not overcommit. He is a guy who has patience, but within that patience, he's able to change his speed, change the timing, if you will, depending on the scheme that's used. And everyone can't do that. Some people like to bang the run play immediately. Some people like to slow play it and read it and then make their cut. Derrick Henry can do both. This is one that's clearly a downhill run concept, right on the midline, you can see. And then he's able to read things, cut back into the boundary, where I think he's going to be aligned often in the shotgun next to Lamar Jackson, forcing teams to defend. This is an oversimplification here. The run game to the boundary and the pass game to the field. It's way more complicated than that. But from a conceptual standpoint, him being lined up into the boundary and attacking there, I think is what's going to be most devastating. Against the Jags, Week 18 was absolutely dominant. 19 carries, 153 yards. I think this win basically kept the Jags out of the playoffs. And I think you're getting an example of what I tried to explain earlier, where he kind of sets up the second cut. I believe it's going to end up being Devin Lloyd, number 33 here. On this outside zone concept to the field, where he's threatening to the outside, trying to figure out, he's reading Devin Lloyd here. And once Lloyd hedges back to the inside of this D tackle, Henry sees him and the block on the D tackle occurring at the same time. This is an unblocked inside linebacker. Normally would be able to make the tackle. Say what you will about Devin Lloyd, but he's a talented athlete. And in this case, Derrick Henry is able to cut it off of him back to the outside to the field for an 18-yard touchdown. I think it's a spectacular example of what he provides the Ravens in terms of vision. Yes, it's an outside zone concept, which the Ravens didn't use a ton of, and the Titans were committed to those inside and outside zone schemes. In my opinion, the Ravens have the personnel to do that, depending on who we draft in the draft in April. Off tackle again, outside zone concept, just smooth. And once he gets to contact, you generally see him falling forward. I will show you some film later on of teams that, quote, stopped him. And, of course, the Ravens did a great job for the most part in Week 6 against Derrick Henry in London. He did bust a 63-yarder and really probably should have had a 100-yard game. 2 plays in that game that I will show you in this film breakdown ended up going down as passes because Ryan Tannehill tossed them forward, even though they're really run-blocking schemes. Another example of the patience, I think this ended up going for 14 yards against the Seahawks. His ability to bring this back underneath of blocks out on the edge. There's no panic in Derrick Henry at all. There's no panic in pretty much any NFL running back, but this is a guy who understands the seam is going to open up if he lets the guys in front of him do their job. And I think there's a level of trust there between Derrick Henry and the guys that played offensive line in Tennessee that'll probably have to be gained through the course of training camp and early in the 2024 season. Additional to being able to attack into the boundary more with Derrick Henry, which Todd Monken and the Ravens did a great job of in 2023 with multiple concepts, I think this just opens up more options to allow Monken to force defenses to roll that boundary side safety down. This play happens to be to the field, but you can see that it's to the weak side of the formation. 2 stand-up receivers here, a jumbo tight end. So this is jumbo 11 personnel. And the Titans are running the zone back to the weak side, away from the tight end or that 6th offensive lineman. I'll give you the end zone angle so you can see it. more clearly, and you'll also get two other plays here that kind of illustrate this point. Ball is on the right hash, and the run play is going to be, to the field. My point in illustrating this to you is historically the Ravens did not attack to the weak side often unless it was with the option. Generally, in those cases, it was with Pat Ricard leading to the weak side. This is an example of a team, the Titans, running to the weak side with no lead blocker, just trusting their offensive line enough to be able to create angles such that the running back can read it. Look at what Derrick Henry's seen in terms of this defensive tackle, who I think has since signed with the Texans. Brings it back to the inside. The defensive tackle is trying to beat the head of the offensive lineman. In this case, you can see he's gotten to the inside, so then Henry just brings it back. You can only do that if you have great feet and you're balanced and patient enough to be non-committal to the gap, because you recognize that NFL defenders are going to be able to two-gap like that defensive tackle was trying to do. This one to the boundary, 12 personnel, so you got two tight ends on the field. One of them is Okonkwo that the Titans lined up at fullback often. Super talented player. He's basically a split zone look, and then he's going to execute a kick-out block. On the inside linebacker, Henry downhill gets 16 yards. Certainly with Pat Ricard still being on our roster right now, we'll be able to utilize a fullback some. This is another example of running to the weak side that happens to be to the boundary as well. Two tight ends set to the field. Original run flow is to the weak side boundary, and then Henry's going to bring it back almost to the midline for 16 yards again. Like I said, completely dominant in Week 18 against the Jags, a divisional opponent. Proper send-off, if you will, for Henry in Tennessee. End zone angle, same play, so you can see what I'm talking about. It's not like the Jags don't have enough people over there to the weak side to stop it in this case, but the point is, numerically, Derrick Henry with the ability to threaten to the weak side into the boundary where there's only one receiver is just going to force defenses into more horizontal conflict than they already were put into by Todd Monken's offense, the run threat of Lamar Jackson, and so many of the quick screens that the Ravens run. I think stuff like this is more akin to what we'll see with the Ravens and their usage of Derrick Henry, not necessarily the toss play. Actually, these first two plays actually go down as receptions because of the nature of Ryan Tannehill's toss to Derrick Henry ends up being forward, so technically they're pass receptions. But 11 personnel, pro twins A, so the tight end, running back, both into the boundary, twins to the field, and what that does is it forces the nickel defender to line up there. The Ravens certainly have wide receiver talent such that you're going to have to play 3 over 2 out there to the field, otherwise we're just going to screen you. A nice illustration, if you ask me, of what you can get done if your tight end is willing to block into the boundary, and you got linemen that are athletic enough to get up to the second level. You can see that Patrick Queen is getting ready to have to deal with the right tackle. Henry's able to get 7 yards again. It's just a pitch play that goes down as a reception. Another example that's a little closer to you, into the boundary. See the ball's on the left hash. Henry and the tight end into the boundary as well, so pro twins A. Another little pitch out of 11 personnel that's forward, 9 yards for Derrick Henry. These are the types of things, not just this concept, more downhill concepts as well, where I think the Ravens are going to utilize Derrick Henry, a premier offensive talent in this league still, into the boundary strategically to force defenses to line up in a manner that's non-traditional for them. You can also do it out of 22 personnel with Mark Andrews or Isaiah Likely being the second slot receiver to the field, which causes a whole new set of problems for the defense because they don't have their nickel on the field. All right, so some non-traditional stuff from an offensive standpoint. Quarterback passes, jump passes, quarterback power here. It actually happens to be a penalty on the Titans. Petit Ferreira, the tackle from Ohio State, reported as eligible. This tight end is closed off and therefore ineligible. I think he had to report as ineligible on the play. But nonetheless, you get an idea of some of the things you can do to put more pressure on the defense, force them to defend a wider variety of schemes. And the Ravens are great at block and power with our offensive line that we had in 2023. Of course, we should have ran it more in the AFC title game. That goes without saying. Derrick Henry is extremely good on outside zone and inside zone. The Titans use those to great effect. He's just as good on gap schemes. Don't listen to anyone tell you that Derrick Henry isn't a guy who can run on any damn scheme possible, including outside sweep stuff like you see here. This is a 63-yard run against the Ravens in Week 6. We happened to get Roquan Smith and Kyle Hamilton both going with the fake reverse, and that just opens up a huge seam for Henry. He's going to threaten defenses in a way that none of our other running backs do or have in previous years, meaning we had speed backs, Keaton Mitchell and Justice Hill. Although I think Keaton Mitchell is far more versatile than just a speed back used on outside concepts. His perhaps most dangerous plays, if you ask me, was getting the ball on downhill concepts, because if he gets through the first level, it could potentially be over. And you saw many examples of that in 2023 before Keaton Mitchell got hurt. But Gus Edwards was our power back. Justice Hill, our third down back, who occasionally was forced to play more first and second downs because of injuries to other players. My point is Derrick Henry is all of those things. He can be all of those things in one package. We don't have to substitute as often to get into a particular scheme based on whatever Todd Monken wants to do. Derrick Henry can execute all of it. Another element that I think he brings to Baltimore from Tennessee is the usage of trick plays, non-traditional plays to the third power. Derrick Henry, as a premier offensive talent, has been used on fake reverses, like you saw against the Ravens on that 63-yard run in Week 6, halfback pass plays, and then a handoff where he actually turns and throws the football. I don't know how often Todd Monken is going to use these things or how often he even wants to. What I'm saying is Derrick Henry opens up the possibility that you can utilize these things because he's executed multiple trick plays at the NFL level in his short career. Did the Ravens run many trick plays in 2023? No. Should they have ran more? It's possible. My point is you have a guy with the ball handling skills. And when I mentioned a lack of panic earlier, I was kind of alluding to this. When you install a trick play in a given week, and perhaps most of these with Tennessee were installed in camp and just repped throughout the years to stay sharp with them so that you could execute them in a game, Derrick Henry has executed them. The Ravens' screen game definitely leveled up in 2023 with the arrival of Todd Monken. In some cases, maybe we used too many quick bubble screens. In my opinion, Derrick Henry doesn't do anything other than accentuate that, particularly into the boundary. This happens to be a 1st and 10 screen against the Falcons in Week 8. I think goes for 9 yards into the boundary to Derrick Henry. We're going to be able to find or manipulate matchups, not just in the run game, but in the pass game as well. Because you have a guy like Derrick Henry, there's certain inside linebackers that are going to be a bad matchup trying to tackle him in space or even on downhill concepts. In my opinion, he's got an underrated usage as a pass receiver. This is a 3rd and 1 against the Falcons in Week 8. I only used 5 games here for the film study, so it's not like I can give you 6 or 8 different receptions. He only had 18, I think, last year. High percentage guy in terms of the catch opportunities that I've seen on film and the number that he converts. Mostly taken off the field on 3rd downs by the Titans, so we are probably going to see similar usage for the Ravens on 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, such that Justice Hill is in the game. I do think there's opportunity to have 2 running backs on the field at the same time occasionally and utilize one of them, either Justice Hill or Keaton Mitchell, if and when he comes back, as the motion man in a jet concept, and then Derrick Henry as the hammer on the dive. Let me be clear about what I'm describing when I say the jet and then the dive. In most cases, the dive is going to be opposite the jet. We happen to be using Zay Flowers as the motion man, as the sweep threat. In my opinion, I'd like to see him be used as that sweep threat less often. We could get this accomplished multiple ways with other guys running the jet that are receivers and or utilizing two running backs. In this situation, obviously, we'd like to have Derrick Henry as the guy running back into the boundary against the grain of the jet motion. In this case, Justice Hill takes it for a big gain on the road in Week 4 against the Browns. It's a concept that the Ravens used often. Occasionally, we ran the run concept with the grain of the jet motion. So to the side that Zay Flowers is motioning to. What you're trying to do, however, is create conflict in the field side defensive end and having to deal with the jet motion. I would advocate for the Ravens adding a third play to this sequence, and that is the jet motion, the fake on the dive or zone, and then Lamar keeping it on a play action pass play to try to develop something down the field. Basically stuff that Ryan Tannehill thrived on during his time as the Titans quarterback with Derrick Henry in the backfield. Another example, this is the Rams offense, obviously running against the grain of the jet motion, even though they hardly ever hand it off on the actual jet. NFL defenses respond to it often, and that's why I'm bringing it up here. You can create conflict in the defense even if you never hand the ball off. Actually, defenses will account for the motion generally with spinning their safeties down, depending on the personnel you're in, whether it's your nickel or your base. Finally, even though there's not a ton of film, particularly not in 2023, of Derrick Henry and the zone read, it's obviously a big part of what the Ravens do with Lamar Jackson. And Henry will only, if you ask me, make that exponentially more dangerous. This happens to be a trips bunch set to the field. Once Isaiah Likely motions out there, you can see you've got the read element between Lamar and Keaton Mitchell. In this case, Mitchell almost pops this thing all the way, goes for 29 yards up the right sideline, back into the boundary. So setting the running back to the field, lining him up to the wide side of the field, and then motioning to a trip set to the field. Really going to create conflict in a defense, whether it's their base defense or their nickel. In this case, the Chargers are in their nickel. Derwin James is the nickel defender to the field. So numerically, we've got numbers on the run play because there's 4 accounting for 3 to the field, with Lamar Jackson potentially being able to keep it and create a 4-on-4 situation to the field. Basically, numbers-wise, Derrick Henry, I think, is only going to make things even tougher on defenses to defend us when you set him to the field. When you set him to the boundary, same concept. Trips 3 receivers down into the boundary. Pat Ricard on an arc release. And then Lamar reading the defensive end that Ricard, quote, should block. So we're talking about, I think it's Boye Mafe right here. Ricard's going to arc release around him to go get the third defender in from the sideline at the second level. Don't count the outside linebacker or 9 technique. And then Lamar is reading that. If he was to keep it, Ricard would block this linebacker. Again, the third defender in from the sideline. Aguilar would go block this guy, and you would have numbers to the boundary, a 4-on-3, if you will, with Lamar being the 4th player, the guy keeping the football. As it stands, it's a give that I think still goes for 8 yards to Keaton Mitchell. No matter where you line up Derrick Henry, no matter what concept you run, it's going to make defenses have to be balanced. They're going to have to defend both sides of the formation because there'll be concepts installed that'll utilize him in a manner to attack either side of the field. Ravens already had a star offensive player in Lamar Jackson, the MVP, 2-time MVP at this point. Adding Derrick Henry, if you ask me, makes this offense even more dangerous, regardless of what wide receiver we draft or potentially sign in free agency. It's my opinion this is a great signing. I can't think of a bigger offensive signing for the Ravens really since Lamar Jackson was drafted in 2018. A bigger talent acquisition, I should say. From a free agent standpoint, Anquan Bolden, of course, helped us get a Super Bowl in 2022. Steve Smith ended up having a great impact as a free agent signing offensively. Steve McNair, another talent acquisition that we didn't draft. Those are the only 3 guys I think that brought anything near the type of impact that a healthy Derrick Henry, a properly utilized Derrick Henry, and yes, I'm referencing the AFC title game again. Derrick Henry gets the football consistently in those big game situations because he has proven to be a top of the line, top of the food chain running back for so long in the NFL and in college. I think it's a great signing. I think the salary structure is perfect for where the Ravens are right now. Of course, it probably means there's going to be some players cut or released that maybe will be re-signed later. Who knows? You guys let me know what you think of the signing in the comment section and what you think of the plays I chose to illustrate how the Ravens are going to put NFL defenses in even more conflict than they already did under Todd Monken.